Philadelphia, Toronto, Brampton. Welcome. So today, everybody, and I want to welcome also the folks that are listening after the fact to the replay. Thank you for joining us later. Today's topic is decolonizing the animal rights movement. And like I said, we have three awesome AJAers joining us for the hour. Over the last couple of months in Canada, folks, over 1,100 unmarked graves of children have been found at residential schools. And of course, it's expected that there's going to be thousands more discovered eventually. With this very grave reminder of the past and ongoing oppression of Indigenous peoples, many of you in the community have been asking how we can, as a community, step up in a more powerful way for Indigenous folks and Indigenous rights. So we have joining us today, Mandi and Shawna, and hopefully soon Eric, three wonderful members of our AJA community that have been very generous to join us today to give us some guidance. So Shawna and Mandi, welcome. Welcome, my friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to give just a little intro of these fine people before I start lobbing questions at them, before we all start lobbing questions at them. Let's start with Shawna. Shawna Gray is a member of Ceg-A-Kin, Nakoda Nation in Treaty 4 territory and the homeland of the Métis. She's a survivor of personal and intergenerational trauma. Shawna is also a master's prepared clinical social worker with authorized practice endorsement. She's worked in the rural public mental health system for 16 years. She and her husband, Joran, is it Joran or Joran, Shawna?
Joran.
Joran, okay.
Joran.
I just, as I was saying it, I'm like, oh, maybe he's Swedish. Have been vegan for 21 years and they have 3 vegan children. She was formerly a country liaison for the Animal Save movement and is currently an organizer for Regina Pig Save, Animal Save Movement Saskatoon, and Saskatchewan Climate Save. So joining us from Saskatoon, one of my favorite cities in Canada. Welcome, Shawna. We're so honored to have you here. We are going to move on to Mandi. Mandi Howard describes herself as two-spirit, sovereignty seeker, animal and Indigenous rights activist. She's been an emergency room nurse and is an Indigenous full spectrum doula. And she runs her own animal rescue, as you'll see by the cutest little kittens in the room with her. There we go. This is Nanook. Mandi saved Nanook from basically death's door when he was just the tiniest, like what, maybe a couple days old, Mandi?
Five
days old. And now Nanook is a thriving kitten. So Mandi is also seen all over the place, drumming and singing at Indigenous events, at animal rights events, to advocate for the land, the water, the peoples, and the animals. Mandi, welcome, my dear. So good to see you, my friend. And we have Eric just on the nick of time. I saved your intro for last. Eric, okay, I'm gonna just unmute you, Eric. You should be getting a request to unmute. There we go, Eric, welcome. Hiding out in your car from work. I hope nobody from work is on Zoom with us.
No, it's just me.
Well, Eric, I'm going to introduce you officially, Eric, okay? Eric comes from Shawna First Nation, a small community on the east side of Manitoulin Island here in Ontario. He grew up steeped in his culture from a young age. It was there that Eric gained a respect for others and the planet and respect for all the animals. Also, he developed a sacred relationship with food, which he still honors today. It wasn't until recent years when Eric realized he wasn't living quite in alignment with his values, and he made the decision to go vegan 5 years ago. During this time, he moved to Sudbury for a year, and while living there, he joined the Sudbury Food Policy Council to establish food sovereignty for the city. Eric works full-time as a licensed water operator for the region of Peel in Caledon and now lives in Toronto. And Eric is also a board member with our Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank. So Eric's also a special friend. Eric, welcome. You know what, Eric? Your auntie, Joanna, she beat you to the panel. That's dedication.
Oh, yeah.
So folks, I'm going to start the questions and we are also going to have it open to questions. In the chat, you can do ***Q if you've never used Zoom before. The chat function is at the bottom of the screen, that just little chat icon. And if you click on that, that will take you into the chat. And let's keep the chat bridge building, constructive. All questions, as is always our AJA policy, are geared towards bridge building. So, folks, I'm sorry to sort of start with a downer, but I think it's just so important. You know, it's been a tough couple of weeks for Canadians, but it's been an especially couple of months for Indigenous peoples. With the residential school burial sites. What has been your personal sort of experience of the last couple of months? Mandi, let's start with you.
I feel like there has been both beautiful things and really traumatic things that have come out of it. Obviously, like, the trauma of the tears are already coming.
Yeah, Mandy's warned us all already, and so we welcome tears. We welcome your tears, Mandi, of course.
Just like growing up knowing what happened there and having folks always questioning whether it was real or not, and like finally having our baby seen. It's a lot, but it's also like such a collective, beautiful grief that like all the nations are sharing together. And we don't even need words because all of our hearts are just absolutely broken. And at the same time, we're all so happy to finally like have our little ancestors like witnessed and acknowledged for the suffering that they went through, and that our people are still going through all the time. This is an ongoing genocide, and this is just one thing that has happened to us. And I feel like it's finally out there with no question. There's no question that this genocide happened to us on this land. And, you know, I'm hoping that this is gonna like help build bridges with, you know, the settlers who have become allies and who are more aware of what actually happened in residential schools. Sorry, and as a new life carrier right now, I'm finding it so hard to think of my child leaving me, and I haven't even birthed him yet. So like it's been a lot, but I can see beautiful bridges happening with people who are just so absolutely devastated by what's happened all around the world, really. And I think our little ancestors are bringing us the medicine of healing. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just...
Oh, Mandi, thank you. Thank you for getting this off to just the most authentic start, because these are conversations we have to have, and I love how you have them from the heart. Shawna, what about you? What's been your experience of the last couple of months?
I think when the news first came out of the 215 graves in Kamloops, I felt so numb to it. And I think, like Mandi said, this is something that we've known. So the number 215 is just the beginning. And so I think I just sort of, maybe I was protecting myself, or maybe from trauma. It took me almost a week to really start to feel, to let myself start to feel. And then it hit me like really hard. And I really had to step back a lot during that time. Not watching the news, not really engaging much on social. I think I even that's when I started the break from Facebook. Like I really just needed to step back. Now, of course, there's been graves found at a community in Saskatchewan at the Cowessess Nation, and I have family there too, so it's even closer to home. It's just, it feels very real. I mean, all the images of just the people shared art. This art was such a healing way, I think, for us to express ourselves through this time. And just some of the pieces I saw of photographs and paintings and things like that, you know, where you could clearly see children in the clouds and the sun in the orange color, and just all of this like earth messages about these babies. It was really powerful. On our way through BC, we stopped at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, and we saw the memorial that was set up there. And the interesting thing was that it was set up as a fire evacuation center now because of these horrific fires that are happening. And so for me, when I saw these kind of two connected things of the destruction of the planet that's happening, and also this site that's like obviously been so steeped in the blood of Indigenous people, it just felt like so much trauma, and you know, like the people that inhabited those lands since time immemorial had methods for managing forests so that these kind of fires didn't happen, and that knowledge hasn't been able to be used because of colonization. It's just, all of it just was like, it just feels so overwhelming everywhere you go right now, because all these connections are so like, I don't know, overwhelming is really the only word I can say, emotionally overwhelming. It's just, you're just walking through the destruction that colonization has created in this country, on human beings, on the planet, on trees, on animals. It's the water, it's devastating. That's how it's affected me.
Thank you, Shawna. Eric, how about you? What have the last couple of months been like for you?
Yeah, so I would like to just share with everyone, and it's my spirit name, and it's a special part of our culture. So I would like to share that with everyone. So I'll introduce myself. So my spirit name is Niga, which translates to leading windman. So for myself, my personal experience around the residential schools, I kind of was in the same boat as Mandi and Shawna. Like, it was good that it happened and it was exposed, and I didn't really realize it till Mandi had mentioned it, but like a lot of people questioned if it even happened, or if kids even went to residential school. Like, there's a lot of people who don't even realize what happened, and now it's really good that it's exposed and it's out there. And when it first happened, I didn't even know, I didn't even hear the news. Like, I was back home on Manitoulin when it happened, and all of a sudden my family started talking about it, and I was like totally numb to it. I didn't feel any emotion towards it until like a week or two into June, and then it hit me like a train. I just totally broke down, and I had a few people reach out to me in my circle, and like I'm glad that they did, because their support really helped like help me process. Like, I wasn't really processing, and then I realized when somebody reached out and asked me how I was doing, I didn't actually like check in with myself. And then when that happened, it kind of just all came like crumbling down on me, and I realized like, yeah, it's heavy trauma, and I didn't realize that till like halfway through June. And yeah, I didn't. It was a weird feeling. I wanted to talk about it, but I also didn't want to talk about it at the same time. So I felt paralyzed. Like, for the whole month of June, I stayed off social media. Like, I wanted to post other things, but then I felt obligated to post about the residential schools being exposed, and I didn't really know or felt ready to at the time. So I just didn't go on social media. I didn't really engage. But now I mean, the wounds are still being opened like constantly in the past weeks. And yeah, definitely there's been healing going on, but there's still a lot of trauma that's there.
There's a lot of love in the chat being sent to you folks right now, and I hope you're able to feel it. So thank you for sharing something that's really so intimate. It's just, again, so generous of you. You know, I think it's important, you know, to admit that, you know, my generation got next to no education around Indigenous history in school. And I think it's a trend that's for many generations. It's really criminal. And I know when I finally took the initiative to start educating myself in the last few years, I was shocked by how little I knew. I was embarrassed. And for those who are just beginning this journey of educating themselves, can you tell us what are some of the most important points about Indigenous issues that you want them to know? I mean, there's such a huge history. There's so much I know, but if you had somebody's ear for a couple of minutes, what are the most important things that you need them to know? Shawna, can we start with you?
Yeah. From my perspective, one of the most important things to recognize is that colonization was such a source of trauma and loss for Indigenous people. And I think that, you know, the whole premise that that coming here and discovering a land, I think that there's a little bit of that we still kind of believe in our mainstream culture, that sort of there was, you know, that trope of the noble savage is still something that people ascribe to, that people still see that somehow there was a bunch of people who needed help to get to a more sophisticated place. And that's what Western nations did by coming here. And I think it's so important to understand that the nations that were here on this continent, this Turtle Island, were sophisticated nations. They were complex. They had systems of government. They had ways of interrelating with other nations. They had already established treaties. They had established trade routes. This was a functioning system of nations. And these nations were older and are older than the governments of Great Britain. And their governance systems are more sophisticated and mature than some of the ones that we see, obviously. I mean, look what Western civilization is doing to this planet right now. We knew how to be a part of the world, and that was part of the way that we governed our nations. And not only that, like not just our governance systems, but our scientific systems were very sophisticated. And I think that we're starting to recognize, or the Western nations are starting to recognize now, that there's so much to draw from in the sophistication of the scientific cosmology of Indigenous peoples, right? Like I mentioned with the forest management systems, that's something now that Western nations are saying, oh yeah, this is something we should have been doing all along. Like I've just seen an article about that like 3 or 4 days ago, that kind of a system of forest management may have prevented some of these terrible crises, you know, and there's so much more than that. There's so much more than that. I think that it's worth learning about those scientific worldviews that we've kind of we've suppressed it all, and we've acted as though the West is the only worldview that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Shawna. Eric, what's something in particular that you think is important for people who are just starting this journey to understand?
I don't know. Shawna really got it on point. I really, there's nothing else I could say on that point. She did an excellent job.
Thank you, Eric. Mandi, I'm sure you got more to say, lady.
I always have more to say about everything.
That's why we love
Um,
you.
I think for me, along with like the political history of what's actually happened and sitting down, doing your homework before having conversations from an unbiased place. I mean, we've all grown up with these notions of the Western world and these notions of Indigenous folks, and now about like factory farming and all of these different things that we hold a lot of sadness and we hold a lot of trauma about what we see. And we have to remember that those are Western settler ideas that have been imposed upon us, and that Indigenous folks are also fighting against those. And for me, I think that the only way that we can all learn to actually find common place is to learn the 7 grandfather teachings about humility and love and respect. There's a lot of them. To sit down and take the time to actually learn what those things mean, because they are towards each other, they're towards the land, towards the water, towards our non human kin. Those are our first family. The animals that live on Mother Earth are our first family. We were given to them, they weren't given to us. And we have very specific relationships with them. And I think that if you can live through those teachings, we can find a way to come together instead of fighting, instead of being like, oh, old traditions have to go and this is the way it has to be. No, we need to sit and listen and understand the oldest teachings.
So, the theme of today was decolonizing the animal rights movement. And I think we've all seen incidences of where the animal rights movement has gone very wrong in regards to Indigenous peoples. So in what ways do you feel that the animal rights movement needs to be decolonized? And why do you think that's important for this movement? Eric, do you have any thoughts about that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, I'll just start by saying, like, to begin with, the animal rights movement, veganism, vegetarianism, living a plant-based lifestyle, all of that wouldn't be necessary if colonization hadn't happened. Indigenous people were already living sustainably and in harmony with everything, not just the plants and animals, but the water and like everything, like down to like even like having a relationship with the soil, which is an important relationship to have. And yeah, a lot of that now it's not lost. It's still around, and it's coming back stronger than ever at this time. And I feel like the animal rights movement has to be decolonized. And the only way that's not the only, but one of the ways that it can help be decolonized is through Indigenous voices being represented in the movement.
Mandi, I know that you've been at the receiving end of sort of a lot of grief in the animal rights movement as a very dedicated animal rights activist and vegan. Can you can you share a little bit about why, in what way you feel the AR movement needs to be decolonized and why?
I think a lot of folks think that assimilation is the key for us. We briefly talked about the seal hunt over email, and people tend to villainize the folks who are in the North who take part without realizing that that's a Western colonial seal hunt where it's mostly white people who have commercialized seal skin for fashion. and it's not about traditional sustaining practices where there's honor and respect and only take what you need and give back, and use everything. This is a commercial practice. When the fur trade happened, which was imposed upon people to survive, when settlers came, I think that people need to do a lot of homework around the issues they blame us for not assimilating to. Sit and listen and have conversations about, the spirit of our drums and the rebirth of them and the way we care for them and what it means to be a drum carrier, what that means to a community. Like you carry a drum who is birthed and given a voice again, and that is medicine not just to you, that is medicine to a community, to so many different folks. It's not just yours, it's collective, and people don't understand the stories behind them, and they need to start listening and understanding these things. Because if you want me to have a vegan drum, then you're going to say that fracking is okay. So the petroleum that's being fracked out of our earth is used to make that drum that will never decompose and will be tossed away, and is just another like smack in the face of our mother earth, because it's another byproduct that we can't get rid of. Where when our drums sing for the last time, we can bury them again. We bury them for the second time, and we grieve for that spirit that has now left the drum. I think that people would really, really benefit from just sitting and listening. I mean, I'm not trying to romanticize this at all, but we know how to love the earth. We know how to take care of the water. We know how to get the resources we need without absolutely devastating the earth and devastating the water and devastating our trees. Like, we're literally either burning right now or we are underwater. And so, like, where are we supposed to breathe? There has to be a tipping point where people say, okay, it's time to listen. And I really, truly hope that people have decided that this is the time. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's a good start.
I think decolonizing is you has to start with listening to each other and opening our hearts from an actual good place, and not saying I want to have a conversation, but this is my defense backup as soon as they give me this, this, and this. Like, don't sit there with points that you want to fight somebody against. That's not having a conversation in a good way. Conversation in a good way is going with an open heart and listening and being, actually asking questions to increase your spirit's awareness of what's happening.
So can I ask, Shawna, if we might have some folks out here that are, that are thinking, but I care for the animals. It doesn't matter about culture. It doesn't matter about, an animal's life is precious to me. What do they need to know as far as taking on Indigenous people before everything else? What can you tell us about why that particularly is anti-Indigenous and even racist?
So, I mean, I think I would draw so much from what Mandi said there, just in terms of listening, but also, like, what I wrote down was, when I was thinking about these questions, one of the things I really wanted to say was stop talking and start listening. Because we are so good at outreach in animal rights activism. We know what we want to say. We have the message so clear, but we forget that we're coming from a specific worldview. And I think I've seen so many memes where it says like culture doesn't matter and things like that. But when you're communicating with Indigenous people who have experienced a genocide, we're in the middle. We're still in a genocide. We're still having our culture ripped away from us, right? And trying to find ways to decolonize ourselves, to get back to our own cultures, to be practicing them in authentic ways on a daily basis, you know. And some of us have found that path, and some of us are still working towards it. And it's the range, of course. But the point is, a long time ago, I came to this place where I realized that everything I know is wrong. And this is the approach that I take when I'm talking to people. Everything I know is wrong. So anything that somebody else shares with me, I'm open to hear it, because I am part of Indigenous ways of knowing is that we're always in a process of coming to know. We don't hold knowledge. We don't own knowledge. It's not something that we like possess. It's something that is there, and we come to know parts of it as we learn. And I think if you can approach an Indigenous person with that kind of a mindset, that open-minded or desire to come to know, right? To really learn. And I think too, absolutely what Mandi was saying about the 7 grandfather teachings, if you use those as the basis of how you're going to communicate with Indigenous people, you come with humility, you come with respect, you come not looking to have your needs met, but finding a way to bridge so that our needs can be met. You know, we have a lot of needs right now as Indigenous people in this country, you know, and we're really struggling. And I don't know how many more times I can hear somebody say, oh, you know, about clean water. And it's just like, you know, it's just like now become part of the lexicon of Canada that we don't have, that First Nations don't have clean water. Like that's not acceptable. We can't just continue to just talk about that. Something has to happen. And where is that action? You know, at some point you get so exhausted from it. So I think if you can approach it from that perspective, rather than saying there's something else we want to take from you, you know, you shouldn't be eating that meat. That's not okay. You know, whether it's traditionally harvested or whether it is part of some of that diet that we need to decolonize, you know, it doesn't matter. This is how we've adjusted our culture to cope with a genocide. And you know, so if it's whether it's bannock and spam or whether it's traditionally harvested deer, those things are important to us right now as part of our transition to getting back to where we need to be. And maybe things will shift. Indigenous communities are extremely adaptable. Obviously, that's why we're still here, because every single thing has been done to eliminate us and eradicate us. Kimberly, that's why you didn't learn about us in school. It was intentional. That was on purpose.
Yeah. Oh, powerful, Shawna. Thank you. You know, can you tell us a little bit about how you've wrapped your head around, like, here you are on one hand, just really fighting for the right of animals to survive. And then you're also, you know, defending your culture, and from what I'm gleaning, there's a sense of our people are the last people that can ever be pointed at, have a finger pointed at them, right? Like this is like, until everyone else in this planet has gone vegan, we're not touching our culture. We're not touching these folks. Is that kind of where you're coming from? And anybody can jump in here. Oh, Eric, are you still there? There we go. He's there. Anybody feel like jumping in on that one?
I feel like, yeah, that is kind of how I feel, because everything that has happened to us has happened through settler colonialism. All the destruction has happened through white supremacy and capitalism and all of the ideals that came with colonialism. So until Western folks can remedy their own ways, they have no right to impose on us when they've taken everything, not just small things, they've taken everything. Like, our language is gone. Our children are still being unearthed. Our grandparents are afraid to admit who they are. You know, our dances, our ceremonies, so many things were made illegal for so long. We've lost teachings, we've lost the land, we've lost our autonomy to live a good life and to be spiritually connected to the land, to be spiritually connected to our waters, to our animal kin, our clan systems. Everything has just been taken, and what hasn't been taken is being appropriated. So until people can wake up and realize that what is happening is not our fault, then stop blaming us, stop coming at us. Because if we don't mass slaughter, and if we do these days, it's because colonialism has imposed that way of survival upon us. And yeah, lots of us have lost our way. But what do you want us to do when you've taken everything and you won't let us find our way back?
Yeah. You know, I think too, one thing that maybe we don't talk about that much is that part of the way that Indigenous people have been sort of allowed in this colonial system to prove their sovereignty is through hunting and fishing rights. That's basically the way that we can say the land is ours, if we've used it for hunting and fishing. And that's not our fault. That's a colonial system that's been imposed on us. So if we lose that, if you take that away from us, then we lose our nationhood in the eyes of Canada. That's a big risk for a lot of people to take. Of course, we're going to defend that, you know, and I think, I'm not saying that's always going to be that way, but right now that's how it is. And hopefully it will change. Hopefully we'll see some of these colonial systems dismantled, and we'll be able to define what makes our nation in our own worldview, in our own languages, in our own framework. And I think it would look a lot different. I don't think it would be, you wouldn't see as much discourse about hunting and fishing rights, because that's not all there is in Indigenous cultures. That isn't the only thing that exists here. And we have a strong history in our ancestors using plants. Plants are sacred to us as well. And as we're decolonizing our diets, we're learning more and more about all kinds of plants that were, there's an article I just read recently about food forests out on the West Coast that were maintained by Indigenous people. They just rematriated a tiny potato down in the Navajo Nation that they found seeds, our archaeologists found them, I think, and they found a way to grow them again. We're getting some of that back, but all of it was lost. All of it was obscured by the colonial perspective on what we were doing, thinking that some of our practices were naive or not as good as the Western practices, even though ours were designed to be part of the land. I even read an article about the nut milks used on the eastern part of Turtle Island, and the documented colonial interpretation of it was that it was reindeer milk, because that was their view, that of course if there was milk it had to come from an animal. But no, we've always used plants, and we would never have milked a wild animal. That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, amen.
And so that's what gets passed down though in the history books, right? Is that on the East Coast they used reindeer milk. But it wasn't, it was nut milk.
Shawna, what you said was actually a real personal breakthrough for me, because I've been reading a lot about the political fight for title of Indigenous folks in Canada, and you're, the fact that you said yes, like the only way Indigenous folks have been able to claim title is by using the land, and that can also be for gathering, as well. But primarily what was recognized is hunting and fishing. And my goodness, what a, like, it's really shitty that that's the only way that the Crown has recognized Indigenous title, is if you're constantly using up the using resources there. So thank you for that. So can we talk about what it is, like maybe campaigns or approaches that the animal rights movement should avoid? Like we were talking, for example, about the seal hunt and protesting, I think most of the animal rights activists would protest the commercial seal hunt, but we know that that's all wrapped up. The Inuit sustainable seal hunt is wrapped up in with the commercial hunt in people's minds. And so I'd love to hear, do you think the seal hunt is just something that we should kind of keep our hands off of and concentrate more on factory farming and things like that? Does anybody have any opinions? And I know you don't speak for everyone, but any sort of personal opinions about that? Nobody wants to put the stake in the ground. Eric, do you have anything that's around guidance around that sort of thing?
As for like what the animal rights movement should like stay away from in terms of Indigenous?
Yeah.
Well, like we already established, hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like, and plants are a big part of it. And now that we're reclaiming the land and reclaiming our relationship to those plants, there's got to be, this isn't really, anyways, this is off topic, but just encouraging like Indigenous herbal medicine people to come out and share and learn from them, because there's so much knowledge in the plants that we aren't even aware of. And I grew up, luckily, like I grew up around traditional ceremony and
oh, we froze. Eric, you froze. Okay. Just wait for a second to see if you can come back. And I was loving this. I'm like, yeah, I'm already writing it down as a potential. Oh, there, yeah. Eric, sorry, you froze right after you started talking about how you've been part of your Indigenous community events and everything.
Oh yeah, so anyways, anyway, I just wanted to share that there's so much knowledge in the plants, and if we only like listen to them and like help reestablish that relationship, it'll really bring about a lot of change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eric. And I was saying, wow, what a great idea. And I've already put it down as another idea for an AJA like lunchtime live. So thank you. Thanks for doing my job for me, Eric. Mandi, Shawna, before I move on, is there anything that you'd like to share about things that we should stay away from, or if there's any guidance around protesting the commercial seal hunt?
For me, I have such like conflicting feelings around the seal hunt because I don't believe in it. But I also know that it's become an imposed way of like financial survival for a lot of Innu folks who do participate. And I know folks that struggle with it because it's not being done in a good way and in a traditional, sustainable way, but they have no choice because it's been imposed upon their communities. So for me, it would be, if you want to protest the seal hunt, protest the colonial forces behind it, and not protest the actual people who have been forced to proceed in this horrific act, when it's actually going to Western colonial fashion bullshit. Like, it's bullshit. I'm sorry to use that word, but like it's not, there's nothing good about it. And know that, you know, our communities are being objectified and used along with the bodies of the seals, just two different ways, you know, like we are part of this systemic violence that is being imposed upon a colonial system that, you know, capitalism is reigning there. So just understand where people are coming from and don't tell them to move and assimilate and all of that, because that's racist as hell. Like, it's also an environmentally racist thing to have this hunt going on, considering everything that's happening in the world right now. So yeah.
Thank you, Mandi.
If that makes sense.
Total sense. Thank you. So I'm wondering, you know, Eric started to steer us into some territory, and so did you, with the directions around the 7 grandfathers, right? Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
7 grandfathers, yeah. And I just wondered if there's any other sort of ways that we could, you know, as animal rights activists and those of us who are white settlers, that we could start to explore, that we could really dive into, to really find ways to collaborate on a much more understanding level with Indigenous peoples. Anything else that comes to mind? I know listening was a big thing. Considering all of our intersections, you know, between the AR movement and Indigenous communities around the environment and animal protection and the collective liberation, do you have any ideas how we could be better supporters, better allies?
I think a key aspect, oh, go ahead, Mandi.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say a key aspect of approaching Indigenous people to work with them is relationships. So a lot of what I would say right now is based on right relations. So for example, one program that I really thought was cool was the PCRM program, the Power to Heal Diabetes program they did with the Navajo Nation. And just really introducing a lot more plant-based and trying to really decolonize the diet, right? Because so many things were survival foods that were given and sort of got integrated into the daily fare of people who were just trying to survive. Those kind of programs are really nice because it's about meeting a need that exists within the community. And I think if we can start to look at it in that way, in the sense of how can we meet a need that exists, right? And some of that is probably about food. You know, even up in Nunavut, they've got greenhouses now because of food security issues. Food security is a huge issue for Indigenous people. And the other overlap that I think is really significant is in terms of the environment and protecting water. And I think if we can, I mean, I think Mandi told in the email exchange we were doing, told a story of having vegans attend a water protector event, and it wasn't a good situation. But I think if we can attend with respect and we can also be part of that fight in protecting water. I think, of course, animal agriculture is one of the things that makes the water the dirtiest. You know, it's disgusting what these huge factory farms do to the precious and sacred waterways that are a part of Turtle Island.
Mandi?
Like Shawna said, I think it's building community and relationships within different nations, because not all nations need the same help. Water and food insecurity is sadly like the biggest issues in all communities. And it's really, really overwhelming to try and navigate, like, where do you go, especially when you shouldn't ask a nation or a reserve, what can I do to help you? Because if they, they've been asking and letting you know for decades what they need. They need your voice to, like, just go do it. Go and make things happen. But I mean, I'm Mi'kmaq from the East Coast. A lot of our water is being polluted by fur farms. That's environmentally racist. It's killing our waterways. It's killing our traditional food supplies. It's killing the wildlife. You can reach out to different organizations and figure out ways to dismantle these systems in solidarity with the nations who are fighting for the same thing, rather than being a white savior.
Yeah, so white savior. Let's talk about how we avoid being that. So Eric, for example, if someone had an idea to collaborate with your community, what are some of the things that they should remember? So Mandi said, just do it. But then I also am aware that we should never go ahead and do stuff without letting the communities be the leader. So how would you work that? Like, how do you think would be the best sort of thing to do to collaborate with Indigenous communities on things, just in that sort of approach?
Yeah, so I feel like the best way to like build bridges or like collaborate with any community or any marginalized group or social movement, it's to first like build upon the commonalities. And the biggest one for animal rights movement and the Indigenous rights movement is the personhood that animals have, and both people recognize that animals are people, and they have their own. There's so much around like the grammar of animacy that we can speak to about the animals. They, both Indigenous people and animal rights, both recognize that animals deserve personhood, and they're not just commodities. And colonization has demoted them to commodities, which they're not. And so yeah, if we can just build upon the commonality of recognizing that animals are people, that's a really big step.
Beautiful. Anything else to add, folks, around things that we need to know about how to build on your culture? For example, one more thing I'm going to ask. I mean, I would love to see more and more animal rights, people from the animal rights community show up at water protests, at the, anywhere that we're doing barriers and things like that. And so if we are going to come there and be there, what are some of the things that we should keep in mind?
Don't chant over us.
Yeah. So I think what happened at the Water is Life is they were like chanting animals are life or something like that, man.
Vegan is life.
Vegan is life. Okay. Yeah. So that is a definite no. Yeah. I also know Matt, my partner, always takes off his no fur button when he goes to when we go to Indigenous protests. Anything else along those lines?
I think not approaching folks in regalia or folks who are wearing traditional pieces and making them feel guilt and shame. because they have no idea they're not just fashion statements to us. A lot of them have been, you earn these pieces and they're gifted to you and you have a responsibility to them. And even something like our drums, like we have a big drum that is our, their spirit, it has to be cared for in a very specific way. And if you're unable to do that, it's removed from your possession because it's not yours. None of us own these pieces. They all have their own spirit. Even after what you see is just their skin, we still see spirit in them. We still have a connection with them, and there's still a story, a very lengthy story behind each piece, and a very real responsibility in having these. So don't just assume that someone is just wearing it because they're Indigenous. Also, I just want to clarify about just going and doing something. I mean, more of a on a political level, go to the governments and start making noise. Don't wait. But if there are specific things that you want to engage in, obviously you need a relationship with a specific nation for a specific issue that you want to target. And instead of going in and telling them what to do, listen to how they need to do something and amplify their voices rather than amplifying yours over theirs. So there's a lot of different ways to go about these things, but obviously creating a relationship will be the most important step. And yeah, just come out to rallies, come out to gatherings, come to our sacred fires when we have them, and are calling for folks to come and bear witness to all the different things that are happening. I mean, bearing witness can be just showing up for us and saying, yeah, I see that this is happening to the water, and this is how it's affecting this nation and that nation, or the trees right now, in the West Coast with, Fairy Creek is being demolished. The oldest of our ancestor trees are being taken down. And I feel like no one really knows that it's happening, but it is. And sorry, Ella. Yeah, show up with an open heart and willing to learn and listen, and challenge your own thoughts on everything that you see. If you see something and it automatically is like murder, 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 or cruelty, 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 just take a step back for a second and be like, I don't know where this comes from. I don't know why it's important to somebody. And I need to realize that the people of Turtle Island have lived in a way with so much love and respect and honor that that you don't know about. We're not savages. We're not. But it's been so ingrained within the colonial system that it's really easy to be perceived that way. And, I've gotten a lot of blowback for, being vegan and carrying a drum. And, I would rather somebody sit with me and listen to her story. My drum has a name. She was birthed. She has, a place in the world. Her umbilical cord was, placed at a tree. So she's always connected to the land. She's a spirit that has so much to offer. And nobody wants to listen to how she was born and what she brings to a community and what she brings to me and my responsibilities in carrying her. This is one simple thing. Yeah.
So, and just for those that have never been to an Indigenous event, I have always felt incredibly welcomed, and it is a place to go to just you're literally there, just holding space, supporting. That's what we're there for. And that goes for not just in physical spaces, but Eric or Shawna, like, can you talk just really quickly, and we're going to end. I know, Eric, you drop off anytime you need to, because I know you're you're taking time out of work right now. But I just wanted to ask, like, how about how we can support you, say, online, you know, in the online world, in the social media world, you know, and I won't just keep it to Shawna and Eric, because I know, Mandi, you might have something to say about that, but you must be exhausted. You must be exhausted talking about it, defending it and everything. What can we do to help? You're so respectful of each other. I love it. Eric, yes, Eric.
Well, first off, I would like to say it's really hard to engage with Indigenous people online about animal rights or Indigenous rights. There's a lot of room for miscommunication, and it's not really a space to be vulnerable. It's a tough space to be in and support each other. Although it can happen, I'm not saying it's not possible. It can be. As far as that goes, I would say for non-Indigenous folks to pretty much like talk to other non-Indigenous folks, because it really helps when it's coming from your own people. And I'm not saying like everyone's the same, but there are some, like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's from your community, it'll be more well received.
Thank you, Eric. And, you know, when with asking that question, I'm really concerned with you having to defend Indigenous rights, you know, and so, you know, do you welcome supporters to jump in as long as they're educated on the issues, like to be able to take off some of the emotional labor off of your shoulders? Is that, yeah? So Mandi, yes. Shawna? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. As long as it's done in a good way where they're not overstepping other Indigenous folks who are speaking about something, then yeah, please. I mean, especially if we're asking you to step forward and, you know, help us out, because it doesn't need to always be our responsibility. We have enough going on.
Yeah. It's time that we take some of the weight that you've been carrying for so long. So one last question. I know this has just sort of gotten a lot of people and in the comments just saying, wow, like I have learned so much. I want to learn more. And I'm just going to go around and if you have a resource that you would recommend, whether that's a movie, a book, a website, somebody to follow, to be able to begin to understand Indigenous issues better and how to support Indigenous peoples more powerfully. Shawna, do you have anything that you can think of?
I didn't bring anything.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I launched that on you. Was there anything for you that has been quite, you know, that has really helped to shape your perspective?
You know, it's obviously been such a process of lifelong learning. I think you just have to open yourself up to that. There's a whole probably worldview that you're not aware of, that you need to open up your mind to. Like all of what Mandi shared was so powerful about the spirit of the drum and things like that, that people don't understand it. You know, they maybe saw a movie like that kind of gives them some sort of fairy tale version of it, but that's not what our lived experience is. So I think just always checking, is this a colonizer mindset? Is this because I live in a colony that I'm thinking this way? I think that's the most important piece when you're consuming any information about Indigenous peoples.
So the resource that is best is to always ask, what view am I viewing this through the eyes of a colonizer? Okay. Yeah. Who has something to lose, right? Or that's the scarcity mindset.
Absolutely. Everything that settlers have here is because it was taken from Indigenous people.
Yeah. Eric, is there any sort of further reading? It doesn't have to be the most profound thing you've ever, but anything recently that you've watched, read, seen that you think could be a helpful thing for people to check out?
It there's a really like it came out came out a while ago, but it was the UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration Rights of Indigenous People. It's a really good resource to check out.
It's amazing. Yeah, and that can just Google it and it'll all be there for you. Thank you, Eric. Mandi, anything that you'd like to throw out there as a possible resource?
Probably the report on missing and murdered Indigenous Two-Spirit women and trans folk. The report is online. It's a place to start to kind of understand the velocity of loss that continues to plague our communities, especially in remote areas. Know that blood quantum is bullshit and doesn't exist. And read books by Indigenous authors. Breeding Sweetgrass had me in tears, the entire book. The whole thing. Yeah. I actually even recommend the audiobook over reading the physical copy because it is the author reading it, and her spirit and beauty in the words is so overwhelming. It's such a gift. And to hear traditional language being spoken by someone and not just trying to guess how phonetically how it's spelled out, which is something a lot of us are doing, trying to reclaim our languages, but hearing it is such beautiful medicine. Not all books are going to make you cry in a great way. They're going to make you cry because the suffering is so palpable in the words, but they need to be read. They need to be out there. They are real stories. They're real lived experiences. And also you're supporting, Indigenous authors who really, really need to be held up because their words are absolutely fantastic. And I feel like they fall through the cracks a lot. So yeah, get out there, start reading audiobooks, man. I mean, audiobooks. There's an app called Libby, which came up during COVID, and it's like a library. The Toronto Public Library has like all these free books. I've listened to probably about 57 books in the last few months. Yeah, if you can find ways to just listen to the stories, I mean, that's the best resource you're going to get, because anything written down from the government is hard to understand, even for me, around treaties and laws and all the things that have happened to us. They're difficult to understand, and that's kind of ableist. It's not everyone has the ability to understand all of those things, and sometimes they're pretty boring. So I get that too. Like, I'm being real about these things. So yeah, listen to the stories, because they're all about the land and the people and our non-human kin, and the ways that we've survived over 500 plus years. We're still here, we're still drumming, we're still here.
You sure are. And talk about love and spirit. You people, I love you. I love you.
We love you.
I am just this has just been such a soulful, honest conversation, and just FYI, we got up to 70 people attending live here today, which is one of the top numbers for an Animal Justice Academy lunchtime live. So it just shows that you've got a lot of people behind you, folks, a lot of people wanting to support you. We hope we can get less clumsy in doing it. We hope we can get better. We are going to really try, but thank you so much for your generosity in helping guide us and bringing some truth to us, and bringing us beautiful ideas, and again sharing your heart with us. Mandy, you're gonna make me cry now.
I don't think we ever have time face to face, whether on Zoom or in real life, where you and I don't just sit and cry to each other's face.
Oh dear. Okay, I'm gonna unspotlight. We're gonna unspotlight you just so you can see your people, your supporters here. Let me unspotlight Shawna and myself, and we're gonna go on to gallery view. If you're not already on gallery view, get yourself on gallery view. Animal Justice Academy, can we please send our great love to Shawna, to Eric, and to Mandy. Mwah, mwah. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and for listening. In fact, there were no questions because we were listening so hard today. I want to just tell you, in 2 weeks, our Animal Justice Academy Lunchtime Live is all about social media with Shannon Riley Nickerson, who's going to answer all your burning questions about how to be effective on social media. So thank you so much, everybody. This was really special to me. This was really special to our community. And let's get out there and let's support these wonderful Indigenous people and communities to the best of our ability. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.